Hello chap here, welcome to the workshop. Now a few weeks ago, Blokey released a video where he was messing around with some 7.5mm Swiss ordnance cartridges and some ballistic gel, and I thought I would jump on this Euro weenie bandwagon with these two revolvers. Now the cartridges are slightly bigger in diameter, but let's face it, they are still kind of weenie. But thought it would be interesting to see. I took them out for a bit of a shoot-off in the deepest, darkest winter, as you'll see from the videos, far colder than it is now. But yeah, we can see the effects on target. No ballistic gel, just holes in paper. And also give my impressions of using them one after another, after a series of shots. And also we'll have a little bit of discussion about the internals, because they are actually fundamentally different. And yeah, that's it. We're not going to go into deep, dark developments, who, what, when, where, how. If you want to see that, please head over to See an Arsenal. They have an excellent episode on each of these revolvers where they go into their typical nitty-gritty details and with superb animations of all the internals. So head over there before you carry on here or afterwards. So we have here in the right corner the French model 1873 revolver, so-called Chamelot d'Alvin, the only revolver, by the way, which is certified safe against mummies. And here in the left-hand side, we have the Swiss 1878 ordnance revolver. All right, let's get a bit of a close-up. All right, here they are a little closer up. They are both pretty big, chunky pieces of steel. Maybe if we compare them to something most people are familiar with, there's a Beretta 92. You can see it matches pretty closely in terms of dimensions, and this one of course has got a slightly longer barrel, so slightly bigger again. So both big chunks of steel. So which one shall we start with? I guess chronologically we should start with the French one. So this is, as I said, the 1873 revolver. So on top of the barrel. This particular example was manufactured in 1875, you can see there. And this one has been nickel plated down the line at some point. This is not the original finish. It's flaking off in places. They were in the white for the army, so, but certainly it shouldn't be this shiny. I don't mind, this protects it from the ravages of black powder, so yeah, I'm grateful to whoever did it, and it's protecting the finish. So it is single action and very heavy double action. Never use that. Loading gate, and we have a ejector which is very, very firmly or positively cammed in the closed position, so you can't, no way you can inadvertently release that when you're fumbling. So you need to push it forward against spring pressure, and you have to ride over this nub here, and then you can line up the chambers and eject your spent cartridges. And then you can swing it shut like so. So this is going nowhere. It's pain, but I understand why they did it, because on the Swiss one, not quite as positive, and it's kind of annoying because it can flop about. So otherwise, if you want to remove the cylinder, you can again release the ejector and then push down this big button here, and then you can slide out the arbor. There are two detents, so one where you can just release the arbor, and then a second one to release it completely. There we go. Now note that there is a flat surface on the end here. This is not a random aesthetic choice. It is a screwdriver. So one of the requirements for the adoption of the revolver was that it should be disassembled without tools, and I guess including the tool on the revolver was technically correct and kind of bending the rules a bit. So this, then you can just really remove the cylinder here Very, very plain, didn't bother machining. They did on the 1874 officers model. We have some fluting, but for the standard model, they didn't bother. Keep it plain, keep it simple. All right, and then we need to get inside. So we need to remove the side plate here. This is done by removing this screw, and this could be done with a coin, but hey, I just removed a screwdriver, so why not use that? All right, and in case the side plate doesn't come off its own free will, there is a little notch here which you can put, in this case, the screwdriver in and just lever out a little extra leverage there in case it's getting a bit sticky. In this case, it's a very well fitted plate, I have to say. And there are the internals. Not captive screw, it would have helped, but that's an extra feature. And here we are in the inside. So there is an awful lot going on in here. Here's the mechanism in all its glory, and French went pure Prussian style here and stamped the serial number on absolutely everything. Pretty rare occurrence. So main components: hammer, sear, trigger, hand, and then this little bit tucked in behind is a pawl for the double action. So single action, it works just like any other. So if we cock the hammer, you can see there the sear engages the notch, and when I pull the trigger, this rear surface trips the sear, and the hammer falls completely flat, and when I release the trigger, there is no rebound, so the hammer stays protruding inside the frame. If you want to withdraw it, there is a half cock notch here, like that. It's not safety, it's just a half cock. If I carry on, then the double action takes over, so you can still shoot from this half cock position, but you need this position to be able to rotate the cylinder freely when you are unloading. All right. And in double action, which is really, really heavy, probably because we've got these lots and lots of springs that are working in collaboration. So we have here the hand, and it's got a little spring here on the back, which is pushing against this pawl, which is forced against the front of the hammer here. So it's got a surface there, here, which you're going to push up against the hammer. When I pull the trigger in double action, it forces it up, and it's going to go up, and at some point it's going to slip out of this notch and drop. Again, this little leaf spring here is pushing it all the time against the hammer. So that, and there we go. It trips, and then the hammer can fall, and then it all comes back to a reset position. So, a very complex mechanism. Somehow it got through all the trials, and there was nothing else simpler. Very, very sturdy, I have to say. All the pieces here are really massive, chunky. You can see there. Big things, nice and, well, relatively easy to machine for the time. And a bonus feature is when you want to disassemble this thing, you have a handy lever here, which is going to release the mainspring, and then you can pretty easily disassemble the rest of the mechanism. So force it down like this, and you can just pull out the mainspring, he says. There we go. And then the rest is under considerably less tension than if you were having to do it with the mainspring still going. So, and then you could just put it back in, mount it also here on the bottom. There's a counter pin, and then you just reapply tension to the mainspring, and you're good to go. So that is the 1873 revolver. Quick word of advice: if you're putting a 1873 revolver back together, on the arbor and screwdriver there is a flat here. Make sure that is facing the flat here underneath the barrel, because if you don't, if you put that facing the other way, for example, and you're not paying attention, you give it a good shove, it is going to get very, very stuck. Ask me how I know. So you make sure it's facing upwards like that, and then it'll go in with a nice firm click, and then you can swing over the ejector, and there we are. Safe and sound, and it's not going anywhere. All right, now let's have a look at the Swiss 1878. Now, development of these is quite interesting, or perhaps the adoption chronology, because the Swiss actually adopted a Chamelot Delvine revolver before the French, 1872 model, so mechanically just like the French one we saw, but like this one with a 15 centimeter barrel instead of the 11.4, which the French one does. But yeah, they adopted the same system, and after a while they needed some more revolvers, and they decided to start exploring what was out there, and they, for some reason, became fixated with self-ejecting revolvers. So firstly there was the von Steiger system, in which if you go to Forgotten Weapons, there's some there's two videos on the various patterns of those. And after a while they switched and they explored some more conventional revolvers, but with the option of having a self-ejecting module, the Krauser self-ejecting module, which could be bolted on to the side of the future revolver to give the self-ejecting function. So they really stuck with that really until the end. I understand in the end why they didn't go for it. There are some problems associated with self-ejecting revolvers, but it would have been steampunk AF if they had done that. But it wasn't to be. So, although this looks very similar from the outside, I mean there's only so much you can do to a revolver, the mechanics are very different, because after a while they sort of went away from the Chamelot Delvine mechanism, and what we've got inside is a Warnant mechanism, which is far, far simpler and really optimized to be simple, just one spring. And of course, because this is Switzerland, Rudi Schmidt did some little changes and tweaks to the basic Warnant lockwork, and so we'll take a look at that just now. So here we have a screw which you need to unscrew, captive. Now you can take a coin of the realm for that. Here's a shiny 5 Rappen coin which can unscrew the side plate. If you don't have a coin of the realm, you can also use the cleaning rod from the standard cleaning kit, which has a screwdriver here on the T-handle. So whichever. Notice as I do that, it is pushing the side plate away. Released yet? Not yet. There we are. So here, and then we just swing out the side plate, which also includes the trigger guard, and we'll take off the side grip, and that is it. It is doing exactly the same thing as the French one is, single action, double action, but we have just one spring, and that is it. Right, let me remove some of this oil, and then we'll have a closer look at how it all works. Here we are, you can see it in all its glory, and we have one big mainspring here at the back. We have the first arm which is linked to the hammer, and the second arm is pushing down on this big wiggly lever here, kinked there because it's got to avoid the axis pin. So single action is pretty easy to understand. The hammer here has an extension arm underneath all these gubbins, which extends down here and has a sear notch in the front, and on top of that sits this extension on the trigger, which has a ridge, a sear ridge underneath, which is going to catch in the sear notch when we pull the hammer back. So the hammer arm is driving the trigger arm and then also carrying the trigger with it. You can see there, as I said, there's this kink, so it avoids the axis pin. And when we pull the trigger, there you can see, there you go, there is the sear surface on the hammer there. And the hammer drops. Now, when I release the trigger, so here, the hammer has protruded into the frame. When I release the trigger pressure, what happens is, of course, there's a trigger reset. But as the trigger resets, due to the force acting on the hand and therefore the trigger, there is also a surface on the inside of this lever which is going to push the hammer back just a notch. You can see it happening there on this surface there. There's a ledge on the inside of this piece, and here we have a rebound in effect. So this was a very, very useful feature to have. Double action is very, very easy. The piece to watch here is the hand, in particular its extension here on the bottom, which is pushing up against the sear extension of the hammer. So when we pull the trigger, it's going to push the hand up, and the hand is going to push the sear extension of the hammer and take the hammer with it until the sear extension drops off the back, the ledge of the back of the hand. Like so. And there it goes. So there we go. Very, very simple system. It does exactly the same as the other one, far less components. For disassembly, it also has a little trick. It doesn't allow you to, to relax the mainspring, but it does allow you to remove it and put it back pretty easily. So here we have a little catch which prevents you from pulling the spring outwards. So you can rotate that out of the way. And there's a little textured corner here on the edge of the spring, so you can pull it up, and then at some point it'll release, and then you can just take it out, and to put it back in, you just hook it back on its little toggle link, and you can use the back of this big lever here to push it back in. Now, one interesting feature of this revolver is that there is no loading gate, and this is because we have some notches which index the chambers for firing, and we have these intermediate indexing portions which are for lining up the chambers for ejection. So here we are in shooting mode, so to speak. So here there's no way that the cartridges can come out, but if I'm ready to unload, then manually, using these very convenient checkered portions here, I can click it to the ejection position, and there it is lined up with the cutout. I can flip out my ejection rod and go on, and then index to the next one, and so on. And when you're loading, you can load up, and then when you're ready, either you can go to the next position, which is a bit touch and go, or actually you can just cock the hammer and then it'll automatically go to the next lined up position for firing. Now, the ejection rod here is, in my personal opinion, not great. There is a spring here which biases the rod in two positions. There's the stowed position here, there's a flat on the end of the rod, then there is a flipped out position here for using the rod, and there is a third position up here which actually pushes the spring here outwards, and there is a little finger, a little protrusion on the inside of the spring which pokes into a hole in the arbor pin to stop you from, to prevent you from pulling it out when it is in the stowed or ejection position. There's the little hole there, or recess rather, but that doesn't seem very effective. So if I put it in the ejection position, I can still pull out the arbor. So it's not foolproof, and there's nothing wrong with this spring, but really it's flimsy, and when I was firing it was very easy to flip this out, and I can imagine if I got unlucky, then it would poke inside a chamber or something. So this is perfectly sturdy in terms of being stowed away and out of the way, but it's not very safe for retaining to retain in a stowed position, and nor is it really very effective, in my opinion, for retaining the arbor pin. I don't know why this would fly out, but yeah, potentially this could ride out during firing. If you're firing for extended periods and you don't pay attention, or you're in a hurry and you don't put this back in a stowed position. So yeah, for me that is perhaps the one weakness of this revolver. Incidentally, this is made in 1880, so there was basically two series. First series of production in 1880, and then a smaller batch in 1881. So this is a number 1704, so mid-range in 1880. And there was a grand total of 4,600 of these produced for the military, and on top of that there were also an unknown number so far of pistols or revolvers produced for the civilian market and also for private purchase for officers, as was the custom in the day. Before we head out to the range, maybe we'll have a look at exactly what we're going to be chucking down the bore. So this is a facsimile of the original cartridge. This is the 11mm 1873. This is a 11.6mm diameter bullet, heeled, and which weighs 165 grains. And the initial load for this, black powder of course, fine pistol powder, would have been a mighty 0.65 grams. And in 1870 they decided that that was slightly underpowered, so they boosted it up to 0.80 grams of fine black powder, giving a mighty muzzle velocity of 169 meters per second, or 620 feet per second. And yes, and I don't really know why they went for this, because the Navy, already since 1870, had a perfectly good cartridge. They had the 12mm Le Fourcheux centerfire revolver, so also closed frame, single action, double action, and they had a bullet, a cartridge with a 200 grain bullet, which was putting out 220 meters per second, 721 feet per second, which was essentially equivalent to 44 Smith & Wesson American, so a half decent, relatively potent cartridge for the time. But no, the army went for this, and eventually they forced the Navy to adopt this too. It's not that the revolvers couldn't handle the other load, because initially when the Navy was forced to adopt this revolver, they kept the 12mm 1870 cartridge. So some of these are the Navy marked revolvers, some of them are chambered for the more potent cartridge, and then eventually they were also forced to go to the standard 11mm ammunition. Now, in all honesty, I have yet to get good performance out of this cartridge and this bullet in particular. So what I'm actually shooting for the test is this bullet. So it's slightly heavier and a sort of semi-wad cutter profile, which gives me far more consistent results than this one. This one is still spraying all over the place, so work to be done. And on the Swiss side, we have the 10.4 Ordnance cartridge, and this has a 10.4mm bullet, heeled as well. It was the fashion back then. This is a 193 grain bullet, 12.5 grams, and there was 1 gram of Swiss fine pistol powder in there. And this was also putting out 186 meters per second, so 610 feet per second. So basically the two original black powder cartridges are essentially the same. This one's slightly fatter and shorter, but in terms of performance, they're pretty much the same. All right, pistoleros, let's go shooting. So perhaps, as was not entirely unexpected, the result at 25 meters was essentially the same. The longer barrel on the Swiss one probably doesn't have any significant impact at 25 meters, but what is appreciated is the fact that the entire thing is blued, so I get a nice crisp sight picture with the front bead. This one, I've got a massive flare shining off the front one. Perhaps I could do with some sight black next time, but despite that, I'm still shooting the same size group. Other features, I can't really decide between them because they each have their pros and cons. What is really great is the extra notches on the cylinder, which means you can essentially unload this without looking. You just need to count because you know you're going to be lined up with a chamber every time. So that's a neat feature. But I have little to no faith about the sturdiness and reliability of the ejection rod. When I compare the two, I can definitely see that we have one firearm that has been conceived for extended use throughout the world, essentially, whereas here we have something for domestic use, for aggressive neutrality. There's 4,600 of these produced, and there are over 380,000 of these produced, all models put together. So there's the Army and the Navy and the officers' models. So yeah, this was made to serve throughout the world in all sorts of conditions, and it was used all the way up to World War I and even further on in World War II in the clandestine circles. So it certainly proved a very rugged firearm. The only downside, of course, is the ammunition, but I still wouldn't like to be hit with the ammunition. Anyway, in terms of the trigger pull, single action is the same. I would say that the French one has a slightly cleaner break. Of course, here I have a sample size of 1 for each one, so I don't know if it's always the case. In terms of double action, no-brainer. The Swiss one clearly has a more manageable double action. You can, even if you go slowly, hit a bit of a ledge there, and then you can pull the trigger. This one, forget it. You have to go all out, use your forearm muscles and grimace, and then you can just about manage it. I would only imagine that you're going to be double actioning this when you are in extreme danger, in which case the adrenaline's pumping, and then the double action will be no issue whatsoever. But trying to do it calmly and slowly is a workout. And yeah, that's pretty much it. They have their pros and cons. I like them both. Reloading the ammunition is good fun. Incidentally, I'm not going to have any details about the reloading. However, these are both heeled, or the ammunition requires heeled bullets, and I will put a pinned comment in the comment section, which I will point you in the direction of a place where you can get things to do to deal with heeled bullets for both of these calibers. So watch down in the comment section when this is released. So there we go. I hope this was mildly interesting. It's not often that you see these two revolvers side by side. And what it leaves me to say is thank you for watching and thank you for your support, whatever you're following us on. And see you then very soon back here or out on the range. Bye.